Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I will be talking about reasons why I moved from the UK to Australia. Now I know there's lots of talk about whether or not I should train in the US or whether or not I should be in the UK, Australia, Europe, Germany. I think this debate will never end and there is no one size that fits it all. I think it all boils down to personal preferences. And so in this video, I'll be talking about why I, as a doctor living and working in the NHS in Wales, decided to make the move to Australia. Stay tuned. So the number one reason why I decided to move is the weather. The weather, I lived in Wales in the UK, and the weather can be very gloomy. And as many of you might know, the UK offers a very rainy weather and cold all year round, especially in the winter seasons where the temperature can range from 1 degrees to 8 degrees and can be freezing cold. In Wales, you hardly get any sunshine and mostly you might get about 5 to 6 hours of sunshine during the summer. And during winter, it can be up to just 2 hours of daylight sunshine. So in contrast, Australia boasts about 11 hours of sunshine during the summer season and about 6 hours of sunshine during winter. More sunshine means less rainfall in Australia. And this is really good news. Even at the peak of winter, it typically rains about just 14 to 15 days. But the good news is even on rainy days, you do get a lot of sunshine and this affects your mood. Whereas in the UK, with the cloudy weather, you are always gloomy and you always sometimes feel depressed in your mood. I'm someone who doesn't really care about humidity. That said, it is a known fact that the UK actually is more humid than in Western Australia. And sometimes because of that, you can have the places being damp and very cold, and you can have all kinds of mold growing in some houses. Not to talk about the fact that I used to spend a lot on bills. I had to pay high energy bills while I was living in the UK because of payment of gas to heat the house. And sometimes the radiators do not even work that properly. However, in Australia, with the tropical climates, you usually have homes that are built such that inside is very cool and very cold, and sometimes you have air conditioning. But I'm somebody who hardly even switches the AC on because I actually prefer a warmer climate. So if you're somebody who cherishes a warm tropical climate, blue skies, and sunshine all year round, wearing lighter clothing, then I think Australia is going to be a best place for you. And it offers an inviting escape from the cold and gloomy weather the UK tends to offer. The number two reason why I decided to move from the UK to Australia is salary. And we all know that money plays a very important and crucial role in our lives. I must say that when it comes to salaries, there isn't much of a difference for a junior doctor when you're comparing like for like in terms of roles and in terms of working a normal 8 to 5 work without weekends or evening shifts or without night shifts included. However, in Australia tends to pay much more when it comes to the penalty rates that you get for working out of hour shifts. And for me as an emergency doctor or as a doctor who works in emergency, I work evening shifts, I work night shifts, and I work on weekends. And for me, these shifts actually tend to be paid more in Australia with higher penalty rates compared to when I was working in the UK. To give you a little context, in the UK, I was earning about £47,000 for my base salary. And when you include the out of hour shifts or what we call a banding, band 1A, I used to make close to about £60,000 per annum. Whereas in Australia, the base salary tends to be about 100 to 150,000 Australian dollars for junior doctors. And then the penalty rates can go as high as 112% when you work on weekend night shifts, and 50% when you work on Saturdays, 75% for working on Sundays, And then any other shift after 6 p.m. on weekdays, you do get a 20% extra. So this actually tends to be more attractive, and the cumulative salary tends to be way much higher. When it comes to senior roles and consultants, they even tend to earn much more than their counterparts in the UK, because consultants in Australia tend to earn about 350,000 Australian dollars to as high as $1 million, especially for surgeons and anesthetists, and even psychiatrists tend to make way much more. And you all know that in the UK, salaries usually for consultants sometimes tend to be around £100,000 for their base salary. Another thing about salary that we need to consider when it comes to the UK is that usually in the UK, when you work on holidays, you tend to rather take what we call in lieu, which is getting an annual leave instead of working for the holiday, working on a holiday. However, in Australia, you rather get paid double the amount of your base salary when you work on bank holidays. And some hospitals even tend to pay way more than even just double of that base salary. And that is some extra cash you can make if you are somebody who tends to work on holidays, or if you are rostered and you're doing your normal shift patterns to work on holidays. Another thing I must say is that we cannot talk about salaries without talking about the cost of living. Because at the end of the day, even if you make much more money in UK or Australia and your cost of living is high, then you don't tend to save more. So it all boils down to how much you're able to save. However, I must say that personally for me, working and living in Australia, I've been able to save much more as compared to when I was living and working in the UK. And my monthly expenses, though they have increased, because the truth is the cost of living in Australia is higher. But as I mentioned earlier, because your salary tends to be much higher than that in the UK, you actually tend to save more. And I've been able to save more for personal things when it comes to housing, when it comes to getting a car and other things which are very important as compared to when I was living in the UK. Furthermore, also when it comes to salaries, you also need to think about your household. And for people who are thinking of starting a family or already have kids, this can actually have an impact in how much you're able to save when you factor in the childcare cost, education cost, healthcare, and all that. I will be talking more about these in subsequent videos when it comes to comparing UK and Australia, when it comes to these basic important things which are crucial for immigrants living and working outside of their home country in with the Western world. The number three reason why I decided to move from the UK to Australia is job satisfaction. And trust me, for me, working as an emergency doctor, this was really a game changer. I must admit that I really enjoyed my time working in Wales, and I really loved the team I worked with. I had lovely consultants in the UK, and my time spent in the UK under the NHS was really amazing, and I'll be thankful to that. I do sometimes miss them. But I must say that working in Australia as an emergency doctor, there is some few differences compared to that in the UK. A little disclaimer, I did work only in a small district hospital in the UK. And here in Australia, I'm also working in a district hospital, but a larger one compared to that which I was comparing that I was working with in the UK. And I must say that my experiences are only limited to these hospitals that I worked in. And so if you've worked in bigger tertiary hospitals, probably it might be different for you. However, for me working in Australia, one thing that I noticed, which wasn't there in the UK, is that Australian emergency doctors tend to be more hands-on when it comes to procedures. You tend to do your own back slabs, you tend to do your own intubations, you tend to pass your own central lines and all that as an emergency doctor. Whereas in the UK, especially where I was working, usually you have a med call and usually other specialties will be the ones intubating the patient, or you have also skilled nurse practitioners who will be the ones in charge of plastering and putting in the cast. I must say that I really love to do hands-on procedures, and therefore for me, Australia tends to be a better place in order to practice my skills as an emergency doctor. This brings to mind the question that most people will be saying, the NHS versus the Medicare that we have in Australia. Well, both health systems are comparable, But I must say that Australia offers a blend of private and public health system, and it tends to actually be advantageous because we all know that the government is not always able to actually bear the cost of healthcare. And in as much as healthcare is free in the UK, but some of the disadvantages is that you have long waiting periods to even get an appointment to see a GP, and some investigations you may be waiting for months and months to get an MRI scan done. Whereas in Australia, because of the mixture of the private and public health system, you can sometimes get investigations done quicker if you have a private health insurance, and you don't need to wait for a long time to actually get a GP appointment, which actually is another thing I will be talking about when it comes to GP practice in Australia. Now, let's be real. No healthcare system is perfect. However, for me, Australia tends to be much better compared to the UK NHS, and that is why I decided to make that move to Australia. Now, let's talk about something that a lot of doctors, especially those in the UK, think about when considering a move to Australia, which is the work-life balance and quality of life. And a little bit of a spoiler alert, I still work 40 hours a week like I was doing when I was in the UK. But it's not just about the number of hours or the fewer hours, but it's about what you can do in your free time and how much free time and you are able to get out of these hours. In the UK, my shifts as an ED doctor were often back to back. And though, to be honest, I did get some off days, usually about 2 to 3 off days. But it is difficult to get a full stretch of 2 to 3 weeks off days unless you use your annual leaves and you swap shifts with other colleagues. But in Australia, you are able to get leaves of up to 5 weeks and you can take them all as a chunk without having to swap shifts. And that is really a good game changer. And then actually, in my current hospital where I work, you are usually after night shifts, you are able to get about 4 or 5 days off, which you can actually use to travel without having to exhaust any of your annual leaves. As in the UK, it is unheard of to get 5 continuous days back to back as off days. And this for me is a game changer because I do not have to exhaust my annual leave to be able to take time off, to reset, and to even travel. And hey, honestly, pair that with the amazing Australia weather, and you can see why this move really made a sense for me. So, what are your final thoughts? Is the work-life balance better in Australia? For me, 100% yes. Now, if you're a doctor in the UK thinking about moving to Australia, I would love to hear from you. What are your thoughts? Do you currently feel burnt out with your current work schedule? What is the biggest factor stopping you from making the move? Reason number 5, the resident pathway. And this is one major reason as an IMG you'd like to consider or factor in when it comes to UK versus Australia and why you should consider making the move. For me, this really wins hands down, and Australia wins hands down when it comes to the residency pathway. As an IMG doctor, you can actually be eligible for permanent residency after working for 1 year and after getting your general registration. You just have to put in an expression of interest and apply for either the 189 or 190 PR visa. And you are likely to get a PR within 2 years of working, of arriving in Australia. Compared to the UK, generally doctors would have to live and work in the UK for 5 years before they become eligible for indefinite leave to remain, which is the equivalent of permanent residency, and will have to live and work for an additional 12 months before they are actually qualified to become British citizens. In Australia, you can become an Australian citizen within 4 years after being a PR holder for a minimum of 12 months. And like I said earlier, you qualify for PR after getting your general registration after working for 1 year in Australia. This is really a game changer and it's a major reason for making the move to Australia. I hope with the 5 reasons I have explained above, they are able to make an influence and give you a broader perspective of what Australia holds for you as compared to the UK. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. And for you, what are some of the personal reasons for which you decide to make the move? And we can have a chat about it in the comments below. And I know that each and everyone's situation tends to be different. And by no means should you be compelled to make the move just by listening to my personal reasons. But for me, when I consider all these factors, Australia tends to win hands down. And I would urge you to also consider making the move to Australia just like myself. Watch out for my next videos as I lay out the detailed step-by-step process for making the move via the various pathways as an immigrant doctor from wherever country you are or from the UK to Australia. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. See you next time. Bye bye.